We know what our goals are. We know what we hope to accomplish.
When I walked in for the first time, and I was kind of flabbergasted, I think.
Oh, hello there. So glad you could come along. I am the Dream Finder.
We're leaving Main Street Station right now, so wave it goodbye.
Welcome to the Main Street Chronicles presents Untold Tales, Stories of Imagineering. Today we have Disney fine artist Joel Payne with us. He's going to share his journey as well as how he was able to work for external companies that helped Walt Disney Imagineering bring the magic to life. I'm joined by Stokes as well as Sam of Mama Bear Jamboree, and we have some really exciting stories to share with you today. So Joel, why don't we get things started off with you sharing how your Disney story got started?
My whole history with Disney started with me being on the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction when I was 5 years old, and I was on this ride. It was my birthday with my mom, and I looked up. My mom had prepared me for the robots because she didn't want me to get scared. I was a little boy, and so she set me up. She's like, "Okay, son, there's going to be some robots in here. They're not real, so don't get scared. This is just all for fun." So there I was in the boat, and I was getting a little nervous, and I prepared. But then we just launched right into the Blue Bayou area, and I'm like, "This is fun. This is relaxing." And I look over, and I see I look at her, "Mom, there's the robots." And she says, "Sweetheart, those are the waiters at the Blue Bayou." And I was shattered. No, I wasn't shattered. You think this would destroy my suspension of disbelief, but instead it inspired me to want to understand how Disney was so good at fooling me. The concept of believable fantasy entered into my mind long before I would ever be known later as a painter of believable fantasy. That's what people seem to want to call me, so I just kind of go with it. But I had that moment at 5 on this ride, and after I got off that ride, I considered it the greatest experience of my life. It dramatically changed the course of what I wanted to do. Up to that point, I wanted to be an astronaut, or I don't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But that pretty much, I decided I want to work for the Disney company. I want to be an Imagineer. So I beelined to the Main Street and asked around, and they eventually sent me to the City Hall where I can get some information about the attractions. And I wanted specs. Even though I was 5, I wanted to know how that thing worked. And they happened to, at the time, have a packet that they handed out to kids. That would give you all kinds of information about the ride that you would never be able to know now. For example, I know that attraction has a 50-foot ceiling. I knew how much water went through it. I knew how many animatronics were in there, how much those animatronics cost, how much the initial budget to make that thing was, and how much it cost to maintain it each year. I know that there are 2 cascades down and 1 up. There's a lot of details that I was studying at 5 years old that my mom was reading to me so I can understand it, And I just, my dad was working in a paper factory at the time, and he brought home pads of paper, large sheets of paper, and on these big, gigantic kind of roll-up paper, brown roll-up paper that just table-sized, I would be meticulously drawing my own top-down map of my own amusement park, kind of thinking of how I would lay it out, and do I want to do the hub and spoke, or can I come up with an even better way of doing it? So most of my summers were spent detailing in great detail this very elaborate amusement park. And ironically, I worked on it until I was like 8 years old. It was on my wall for many, many years. And ironically, years later, a lot of those attractions that were just ideas that I had in my head would come to fruition, would come to reality. One of the ideas I had, I thought it'd be cool to take the track and put it above you, and you'd be in a swing, kind of like, the swings that go around in a circle, and they strap you and you just go in a circle in the swings. Well, get in one of those, but the track is above you, and you'd swing back and forth down kind of a jungle type scenario using gravity, And later, the Ninja attraction would come out at Magic Mountain, and it did exactly that in a more sophisticated way. I also had a really cool idea called the Bullet, where you'd have a car and the wheels would be on the side of the car, not on the bottom. Because if they're in the bottom, you would be, the center of gravity would be like this. But if they're on the side, then you could spin. You could do F-16 maneuvers and I put the whole thing in a tube so that you can go underground. And I called it the Bullet for a reason, because you are the bullet. And when you're, and it's a lay down roller coaster, and it had music. I thought it'd be really cool to time this with music. And later, again, I came with this when I was 8. Later, we know that attractions have now had music timed. Space Mountain finally had music timed, and that's one of the biggest, coolest upgrades, cheapest upgrades to it, that added so much value to that attraction. And here I was thinking about that at 8, And later, a German manufacturer would come out with a roller coaster where the track was on the side, and they had the track, and it was doing these incredible barrel rolls. And it was a short little test track, but it proved that could work. So, growing up, I was like, kind of frustrated as a kid, because I was not working for Imagineering, and all of my ideas were happening in front of me, and I wasn't getting any credit for it. It was very frustrating. I was even thinking at the time, when I was in that age, about flying cars and how would that work, because Walt had inspired me with Tomorrowland and rocketry to think that way. So I was thinking, 8 or 9, lawnmower engines, and you'd sit on the top of it, and if you can get enough of them to lift you off, and somehow, some way, if you can control all of them in the same direction. Drones, all these years later, drones are happening, and I still believe that that's the way that we will be flying around in cars in the near future, within the next 15 to 20 years. I believe that technology will be more than applicable for it. So I already had kind of the Imagineering spirit in my mind, and that all came from the germination of seeing Walt's last attraction, his last opus, and still to this day is probably the most extraordinary attraction of all attractions. Even though I think that the new Star Wars attraction beats it, I still think there's a charm about all of those lifelike characters, and that world, that environment, still being better than anything that anybody's ever done, really, truly. So when I got into the video game industry, having worked in the film business, when I saw Jurassic Park, and I thought, well, computer technology, when it catches up to what Jurassic Park is doing now, when the video game industry comes up, I could potentially be the Spielberg of the video game business. Well, that didn't happen, but I did manage to get myself into a lot of pretty big projects that were artistically driven. And I think it was 1995 or 94, somewhere around there. It's a long time ago. The company that I was at fell apart, and right across the street was Angel Studios. And I heard rumor that they were working on the Virtual Jungle Cruise, an attraction that was going to kind of redefine the future of ride design for location-based entertainment. And I got an interview, and I begged them. I literally said, pay me anything. I don't care. I will work here for free. They were so happy with my little tests that I was doing with them that they hired me, and they put me on as a lead, where I got to. We had a pretty big team of like about 20 different people, a lot of them being artists, a third of them programmers. That attraction was built with what we call a reality engine, at the time an SGI reality engine. So SGI was a leading company in graphics at the time, and the reality engine was a computer the size of a refrigerator. So that's what we had to walk by, that was powering this thing. So at the time we thought, this is just incredible. This is like HAL, and this is going to be this is a beast of a machine that's going to give us all the things we needed to do to build this futuristic attraction. So I was super excited about it. And different artists had different jobs. So we had people that were painting textures, and then we had people that were designing the characters and then modeling the characters. And my team, we had 2 other artists, and me and another lead were pretty much staffed with, tasked with figuring out how to build this rapids experience. And the whole thing was a kind of a play on the actual Jungle Cruise. So we got to go to Disneyland, and they had it shut down. It was after hours. We got to take the boats and drive them, and then we were going forward and back, and just to kind of see how they moved. I got to steer it and everything. It was fun. Of course, you don't steer, you're on a track, but but I got to go through it, and we took tons of pictures, and we got to learn a little bit about the history of that attraction. And one of the most fascinating pieces of information that I learned is when Walt was struggling trying to get the attraction built, to fund it, the soil that had been dug out to make the river was so rich in nutrients that they had sold the soil for a lot of money, actually. And that's what helped fund that attraction, which is, talk about just clever thinking and no waste. I mean, he was an environmentalist to begin with. He was really thinking about how do I make the best out of nothing. So, and back in those days, they didn't have a lot of restrictions on how you build something, because Imagineers were new, and they pretty much had free reign to do whatever they want with no one telling them no. And so I was told that they pretty much just took the top-down map of the river and laid the whole river out with sticks and started digging. I mean, there was some measurements. There was definitely some top-notch guys, but for the most part, they just kind of eyeballed it all. And so I took that in stride, and the art director of the Virtual Jungle Cruise came out with a top-down kind of map, kind of like the map that you get for free if you ask for one at the Jungle Cruise. You get this really beautiful little map that they hand out to guests that are asking about it. And so I had one of those for our project, but I was given complete creative control on how to lay that out. Really, when it came down to it, I can make some of the channels more narrow. I can add more bumps and ridges, and we can add a little baby waterfall here. So I had complete creative control over the track that you were on, this rapids experience. So for a majority of the first part of the project, first leg of the project, was to lay out just the river. So it was pretty much just all me initially trying to figure out how that went, and a lot of iterations, while the other two were working on building on assets like plants and trees and other assets that we would ultimately populate that world with. And eventually I would come in and also do that and build half of the environment from the water up, in terms of the experience. So we had a mud run, we had a crystal cave that you would drop into, we had lava pits, we had an ice cave, we had whirlpools, and a jungle and a forest. We really just had every possible environment you can imagine. And then the dinosaurs that you would find in those environments interacting with you. That's what we had kind of come up with. And all along through the whole thing, Disney was overseeing it, evaluating our work, and eventually they brought in, and we got this warehouse where we bought, we built this air bed, and the way that the attraction works is there's this massive air mattress, basically. We called it the possessed water bed, and it has, I think it had 6 compartments that would independently fill up with air really rapidly, really quickly. And think of them like airbags, but embedded into a giant air mattress. And each one of them independently filling up and releasing these ballasts that would simulate water, rapids as you're going over it. And it was kind of incredible to see what the internal Imagineers had built. So that's what that was their part. They built the mechanism, the actual ride vehicle, and figured that whole thing out while we were doing the visual aspect of it and all the physics in the virtual side of things. So when we saw this thing work, the first thing we did is we took the real raft. I mean, this is a real world raft, and we put it on this thing on top of it, and got in it and started to seeing what this thing would do. And we wanted to see what it would feel like going over a waterfall. So the way that you do that is you drop the front ballasts to the bottom. They get dropped, and you lift up. The back end in the middle stays right where it is. So you're teetering like this. You're doing that. Well, the first time we did that, the whole thing came sliding off and crashing, and we went right into the ground and onto onto the floor because this thing was incredibly powerful. Like we didn't realize how strong that thing really was. So we, of course, had to strap this thing down. So we strapped it down. And then one of the things that the Imagineers gave us that was also embedded into the top of that mattress were sensors. It was a sensor strip that was on the left and right. So they gave us paddles, real world paddles, and they cut the bottom of the paddle out. They put like a tooth cut into it, and then they slipped a roller blade wheel right into it and attached roller blades wheels on the bottom of that, so that when you stroked on the pad, the sensors would pick up that action, okay, that sweeping action, and it would tell our programmers that was a trigger that was moving, that was a paddle that was moving us forward, pushing us forward. So this worked accurately to, four people rowing properly, and we calibrated that with the visuals, and and of course calibrated that with the airbag underneath it. And
that was actually something I was going to ask you about after the video that you sent. Like, were they just props, or did they actually serve a purpose? So that's really cool that they actually did serve a purpose.
Absolutely. Now, here's the fun part about how much they serve a purpose, okay? We learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of things working with the Imagineers. A couple things as an artist that I learned was leading with light. The way that Disney lights their dark rides is done in a very, very particular way to draw your attention to what they want you to look at. That's why the Omni Mover became just such a perfect mechanism, because they didn't have to do it with lighting so much. They did it with the vehicle to control what you're looking at. But in the early days, when they didn't have, a controlled, viewfinder, so to speak, they used light and the way that you lit the artwork. So we really had to learn, 90-degree angles and how we laid out these rooms so that we would light the doorway so that you would know to go to the doorway. Because when you're in this open-ended, especially with our attraction, because our attraction you can go anywhere. You literally could paddle in circles forever if you wanted to, and stay in one section and never see any. So we couldn't have that. So the first thing we had to learn was leading with light. How do we light this and path this and design these rooms in such a way and create foliage that would frame where we wanted you to go and look at any given area. And that was a really big challenge for me, trying to figure out the best way to do that. And over the course of the project, we figured it out well. We understood exactly what Disney wanted. But we still had problems. We still had that couple that wanted to just go in circles, and yes, those paddles worked. So we had people getting stuck. They would get turned around and they try to be paddling upstream, and going nowhere because we had a strong force on it. So Disney turned me on to this other term called the weenie wire idea, and we all kind of giggled when we heard it in the meeting. We're like, what the heck is a weenie wire? So let me explain what that means. So when you're at Disneyland and you're at the railroad and you're looking down Main Street, what do you see? You see the castle. So what does the guest do? Ooh, castle. Let me walk that way. Then when you get to the castle, what do you see? Ooh, Matterhorn. Let me walk that way. And when you get to the Matterhorn, what do you see? Ooh, Space Mountain. You see what I'm saying? Wherever you are in the park, there's something off in the distance that corrals you down the direction that makes you want to go that way. So we did a little bit of an artificial version of that. So if we didn't feel paddle strokes, or we felt like somebody was in a zone, an area for too long, the weenie wire would kick in, and that was code that would quietly pull you in the right direction until it would completely take over and pull you into the next area, so that no matter what, you were eventually going to go in the direction that. Now, was that a little unfair? Was that taking away some interactivity? Yes, but when you're working with Imagineers, the experience is far more important sometimes than the level of interactivity that you get. And we're telling a story here. So we wanted to tell a story. So what was the story that we were told? So the story was going to be about Zelensky, the guy from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And the idea was that he had invented time machine and he was going to try it out on you. And then, of course, he transports you back to the Jurassic era. And unfortunately, he loses it right when he gets there. So he disappears pretty quickly once that's what we had. So we had him as Easter eggs that would pop up. He's frozen in the frozen section as you go by. He's like stuck like this. So we had little gags, just like the traditional Jungle Cruise. So that's one of the things that was kind of nice, is trying to take, the experience of the original traditional Jungle Cruise and use those same types of humorous mechanisms in ours. So we were coming up with ideas all the time. What can we put in here? So I suggested we make him blue and put him in the ice, and that was a funny gag. You go by and be like, hey, was that Zelensky? And sometimes you would see him and sometimes you wouldn't, depending on which direction you were pointing. So we got that rewritability that is what Walt was all about. He wanted to get you to rewrite it many times. One of the cool things is when you got to the bottom of the attraction, if you managed to get through the entire leg of one strip of the river, we would get you into a cave, and I had this idea that we could get you into a cave, and I can make a clone of that cave, an identical clone that would be at the top of the river experience, so that when we got you into that cave, we can seamlessly transition you, that when you came out of that cave, you would end back up at the top, that would give you the ability to take another leg down the river. So we found out very quickly that it became kind of a competition for guests to see, could they get all the way down? How many different paths could they explore going as fast as they could, no matter what? You'd have rewritability. And that was the benefit of CG. That was the benefit of building something so vast that wasn't going to cost a lot of money to make in the long run. And, had we continued working with that methodology, could have allowed us to rapidly implement alternatives to that attraction that could have had that ride working effectively for decades and decades to come. They've done that with Star Tours, where they just implement a new movie and we're back, people want to see it. And we could have done that in considerable fashion had we continued down that road. Unfortunately, when Disney Quest opened, it was hit and miss. A lot of people wondering why we should be spending a lot of money on things where there were only a handful of attractions that we thought were to that par, that standard of what we expected from Disney. And a lot of them just seemed like overpriced, Dave and Buster's game, arcade game type experience. Nevertheless, it lasted a long time, and our attraction was one of the most popular for many, many, many years to come. And it was there until they demolished it. So I'm very proud to have been a part of an emerging technology that I think had all kinds of potential, and still has all kinds of potential in terms of interactive attractions, virtual attractions, using technology. And I think you'll see a lot of that from what I've seen in the new Mickey Train experience, where they're using art and animation and projections. They're doing it in the real world, but they're taking advantage of something that could easily be, for decades, improved on very quickly with how they've implemented it. So I'm very excited about seeing how what we did was kind of the beginning of all that infrastructure that the Imagineers are now exploiting, and it's just great stuff. Ironically, after working on the virtual Jungle Cruise, I got to work on a project called Oceania, and that was the world's first dome projection system experience, another LBE attraction. And that was for the Lisbon's World's Fair. And, I was, being a Walt guy, super excited about going to a World's Fair. I just wanted to know what that was like. What did Walt feel like going to? So I got to get my passport. I was told I was going to go. So here's what happened. So I was on this team dome projection, but we didn't have what ultimately became Soaring over California. We didn't have a ride. We just had the dome. So my job on that project was to build a world that you would fly through. So I was the guy that, again, the track guy that figured out how far can we bank, how far can we move, how low can we get to the ground. All of the physics and dynamics of the visual experience on a massive dome projection system that I didn't even get to see firsthand. I had to guess as to what that would be like, because I never, this is a massive, massive thing, and it was set up in Lisbon. So I had to guess as to how fast you'd go, how fast we'd bank to even know what that. And again, I never experienced it. So it was just complete guess. So just right about before we were going to go to the Lisbon's Fair, and I had all my bags packed, we had an A team that had gone to set up ahead of us a week, and then I was told I couldn't go. I'm like, are you kidding me? Why? This is horrible. This is horrible. I can't go. This is the first time I'd be out of the country in my life. I'm going to the World's Fair. You're going to tell me I can't go? I just spent a fortune on this, trying to expedite this pass, my pass, so I can go overseas. And they said, well, Joel, unfortunately, it looks like your simulation, the one that you put through, is making everybody sick. And people are throwing up left and right. We're talking about like 9 out of 10 people are throwing up here. So apparently, thank God there was like a linoleum floor, for what I was told, because they were cleaning up, throw up a lot. And I had to stay back and redo that animation, that fly through, over and over and over again. I literally had to re-render that thing 1,000,000 times to figure out what that was like, completely blind, not having to experience it myself. So I missed it. But that technology and the dome projection system ultimately became soaring, and obviously you know how well that went. They figured it all out. They knew how fast to go, and that's just another really cool thing where I got to kind of do the first part of that became something even bigger. And that happened again to me right after that. Right after that, I worked on the Sky Pirates, which was a Steven Spielberg attraction for GameWorks, and that was something that shot you up 4 stories in these chairs. So you get strapped into this chair and then shoot yourself up 4 stories. And it was basically a free fall type experience with a visual that was happening in front of you. And I did the visual, and I did wrote the music for it and everything. But looking at what ultimately became Tower of Terror, again, I could say I kind of did that in a micro version of it long before the Tower of Terror concept was ever made. And just our connections and relationship with Disney and them seeing what we were doing, it's not hard to see how you can kind of connect the dots on where ride technology was going and where they wanted to push it. And so it's kind of a blessing working at Angel Studios on those 3 attractions that most definitely had an impact on what Imagineers would later do. And it's funny because actually, when I was working on the Virtual Jungle Cruise, I pitched the idea of a pirate version. I thought, hey, we've got this technology. It'd be super easy for us to take this. And I was trying to think, how could I write a story where you could shoot the pirates and get away with it? Because I knew how politically correct Disney was. They weren't going to let you shoot people with guns. They were already taking away pop guns and stuff like that in the park, and now they've gotten rid of bubble guns all these years later because again, we live in a different age. But at the time, I was already thinking like that. I was already thinking, how do we make a story about pirates where we can have pirates attacking you and you can shoot at them? And I thought, what if they were a ghost ship? What if we can turn them into ghosts? And and maybe the moon, when the moon comes out, that's when they turn into the ghosts, and that's when you're able to shoot them. But you can't shoot them when they're people, because they're invincible, and you don't know why they're invincible until the moon comes out, and then they turn into skeletons, and that's when you can go. And sadly, that ride was never really. That story was poo-pooed, and they thought that was a bad idea.
And then they made $1 billion movie.
Well.
Sounds familiar.
I've got that time stamped in emails, and I got the treatment. So look, I love Disney, and I love how that progressed. And yes, our team at Angel did not get to do the Pirates version of that. They ultimately did it internally because it was probably a little bit more inexpensive to do it internally than have the external guys do it with the big budget, because we wanted a lot of money and we wanted to do it right and well and at the highest level, and their internal team was probably going to save them a lot and still get them there. So I unfortunately, I pitched a great idea that ultimately somebody else took advantage of, and it's a little heartbreaking, and you lick your wounds, but that's just how that works. You want those things to happen. You want to contribute to ideas, and you hope that they get made. And if they're made without you, it's okay, just as long as they get made, because you care about those things happening in the world. And so just looking back at all that, it was probably the greatest highlight of my career working on the virtual. Truly, I could easily say the Virtual Jungle Cruise, top of my list of greatest experiences of all time. I mean, just imagine all summer long riding a ride. That's all I did all summer long. I mean, that's not a bad gig if you can get. That's a great gig if that's what you're doing. So very proud of it, and our team. We had a lot of pride in what we were doing. We wanted to do our very best, and we wanted to honor all of the great attraction makers that came before us, and I think we did that. And I think the longevity of that attraction proves that point. I think we ultimately, you got to hand it over to the audience, and if either the audience says it's worth it or you're replacing it. And it lasted from 1995 until about 2 years ago, and now our phones could actually power that attraction in terms of what the Reality Engine was doing, just in terms of perspective of processing power. So I consider that a win.
Now, what was opening day like of Disney Quest? Was it nerve-wracking, or was it one of those proud papa moments?
It was a proud papa moment because by that time we had worked out all the bugs, and we had been play tested it for a year, and we were really, really confident that nothing would go wrong. Of course, that's not how things work in when you're opening up a new attraction. Something always goes wrong. And luckily, it wasn't something that was connected to anything that we specifically did. The Imagineers, when they ultimately installed it in the location, and again, I never got to go and see. This is another attraction. I never got to see it at its actual location, but because we had it in a warehouse, it was ultimately all moved and installed into Disney Quest Florida. And I've never been to Florida, so kind of ironic, but I'll get there eventually. But they had set it up, and one of the things that they wanted to plus it. Disney's always about plussing it, so they put caustic lighting on it so that it looked like water, effect on the whole thing. But they also put in spritzers. We didn't know about that, so they had written their own little code and made it so that when you went over a waterfall, you got spritz in the face. Well, unfortunately, that little addition over time started making the attraction a little funky, and the mold started building up, and slime started building up, so they had to take that out. But other than that one little hiccup, I'd have to say we built a really reliable attraction that I think a lot of people loved, and I've gotten over the years a lot of people telling me I wrote it and I loved it, and I can't believe you had something to do with it. And again, just a super proud moment. I think the whole team deserves a hand. I mean, we really worked as a very, very organized, compartmentalized team where everybody had a part and we all worked together to make it happen.
So which location were you at then?
Well, at Disney Quest, we worked at Angel Studios, so that was all in Carlsbad, and the warehouse was in Carlsbad. So
did you get to visit any of the actual
No.
Disney Quest locations?
I did not get to go to any of them, although my bosses all did, everybody above me did, but I immediately, when I came off that project, I was right on to Oceania, the dome projection thing. So, at the time in that company, I was kind of a key guy that would go on these secret projects, and I'd be first in on them. So, I was the first in on Midtown Madness, helping the programmer create the physics engine for that, and I was the artist doing this kind of simulation with him that would become the engine for Midtown Madness. So I the second that ride was done, and you'll find this with a lot of the Imagineers, the second that they're done with the project, they're right on to the next one, and they don't always have the ability to go and see it unless that's their job. And it's their job to do deployment at the location. But a lot of these people, a lot of the Imagineers, they work, out here in California or in Florida, and they may never get to see their hard work unless they pay to go see it. So I missed it. But I got the videos and the memories, and that's all that matters.
Before we started, Stokes and I were talking about how we both had the opportunity to do Disney Quest in Chicago as kids. So we were just talking about that right before you came on.
What did you think? What was your favorite part?
All I can remember is the elevator ride with the genie, so I'm going to say that.
I can remember that, and I do remember the Buzz Lightyear bumper cars.
Now that goes on to my next part of my career with Disney, the genie thing. So one of our guys on our team was one of the original animators on the Magic Carpet attraction. So he was our animator. So the guy that animated the Aladdin carpet attraction, the VR carpet attraction, was our animator on the virtual jungle cruise. And actually, before I forget, this is a maquette. Everybody on the team got one. We got to pick which one we wanted out of the different maquettes that have been made. We had a T-Rex, and it's seen a lot of packing and storage and time, but we got this really cool thing, and they paid for it and gave it to us, and that's a little memento from the attraction. Not too many years after leaving Angel Studios, ironically, I would get called and interviewed and ultimately become the company art director of a company called Zombie Games. Those are the guys that, just by complete dumb luck, are the ones that were working with Disney as well on Disney Quest, and they built a make your own roller coaster experience, which was the #1 attraction for a while. When Disney Quest first opened up, you can make your own roller coaster as a simulator. Those guys were behind that. So, when I was working on the Virtual Jungle Cruise, it was kind of this simpatico type moment, this camaraderie of where we kind of knew where we were coming from. And they were working on Disney's Atlantis. And I guess they found out, my skills as an artist painting Disney textures and stuff like that, that ultimately I would come in to try to salvage a project that at the time wasn't doing so well. This is an outside company, again, working with Disney Interactive. So the Disney Atlantis game, I was brought in to kind of teach these guys that were mostly first-person shooter type artists, where they would take pictures of, the ground and then turn it into a tileable texture, and they'd make all of the world out of these photorealistic photos. They didn't understand the idea of, how to paint in the Disney way, especially on a Disney project. So I was brought in to kind of art direct that. And so, ultimately I modeled the characters and the vehicles in that thing and painted all the textures, because the team was kind of struggling with that part of it. I didn't even want credit on it because it didn't turn out to be a very good game. But there I was, having to wrestle with Disney as an art director, where they told us that the guns can't shoot like they do in the movie. We're going to have them shoot gel, it's going to be like a gel gun. And it was just kind of silly, these are first-person shooter guys saying, okay, we got a pop gun that's shooting out, Nickelodeon gel. It was very lackluster and kind of disappointing, but we put on our big boy pants and barreled through it, and it is what it is. But I do recall going down to Disney Studios and sitting shoulder to shoulder with Don Hahn, the guy that was behind Atlantis, and he's like, hey, what do you think, Joel? I was watching this massive effect of, this huge explosion of an underwater submarine and sharks flying by and all these massive effects going off. He's like, you could do that, right, with the game, right? You could do that. And I'm like, sure. None of this was going to happen, but I had to humor him because, it was a horrible situation we were in at the time, and we just needed to make it through it. So, we did the best that we could. We bailed through, and eventually it came out, and it made the money back. But it was not a good project for either of us, for Don Hahn or us. Atlantis didn't do so well, and when a game is connected to a movie that doesn't do so well, chances are the game's not going to do so well as well, and that's what happened. And then years later, I would leave the video game industry and throw my hat in as a fine artist, and I took all of the years working with these rides on these attractions, working with the Imagineers, and using their methodologies on lighting and character design and storytelling. And now I deploy all of those amazing ideas in the way that I structure these pictures, these paintings that I do. And it's resonating with people. For example, when I did the 50th anniversary Haunted Mansion painting, I had seen a lot of mansion paintings, growing up, going to Disneyland. You just see them there, and the mansion had always been depicted as this kind of cartoonized, forced perspective, and they've got Mickey and Donald, and they've got maybe vampire teeth in or whatever. They're very cartoonized. And just having talked and met with Bob, talked to Xavier, and understood, what the mansion was really about, I was going to do it different. I was going to do it the way that Walt told these guys to do it, in that the mansion is a real place. That's a real house. it's not a cartoony house. He never wanted it to be a cartoony house. He said that all the spooks are inside, all the fun is inside, but the outside is a nice, beautiful place, And so I approached my mansion painting in that way. And it was kind of the first time that it had ever been painted that way, according to Disney. They'd never seen it done that way, where I did it as if it was an actual house that really existed. And when you do the research, you discover that it was a real house. It was the Shipley Lydecker house, and it was a real house that existed in Maryland. And I lived in Maryland. I had a lot of kind of kinship to the mansion. That was the first thing that I really spent a tremendous amount of time on. It took me 2 years of meticulous painting time to do all of the details in that. And it sold out. It sold out before it even hit the wall. They had to do a lottery on it. And it's still one of the #1 selling mansion pieces they've had. And I did another mansion piece that'll be coming out here shortly, 2 mansion pieces actually. So when we get out of this coronavirus nonsense and we get back to it, I have volunteered to be the first on deck to go back to Disneyland and do signings with them, just to let them know I'm not afraid of anything, and just to kind of have that Walt spirit of I'm not going to say no. I'm going to get it done, and hopefully we'll have people coming back and enjoying all of the beautiful art that I've been working on in quarantine. So, but understanding how the Haunted Mansion works, that's how I approach all of my paintings. It doesn't matter if it's Pinocchio or Snow White. I want to make it so that you can go back to Snow White as if you had an HD camera, and what would the cottage look like now? It's not like it's a different place. It's the same place, but we just got a better, clear view of it. But we still have all of that artistic charm and detail. It's not so photorealistic that you don't have any of that love and charm that Disney's known for, that artistic touch. And it's worked very well. I've done very well as a single father, taking care of 3 kids by myself for many years. I've managed to, take care of my family on just my artist's income alone, working with Disney. So I have a lot to be thankful for. I have my whole life to be thankful for when it comes to Disney. And it's just nothing but gratitude and just kind of shock that I've been able to have this life. And it all started with me riding the Pirates of the Caribbean and being stunned that I couldn't differentiate between the fantasy and reality so easily. And it's led to this. It's a good life.
Well, I know I speak for everybody else, but we're thankful for you. And I know as a owner of your pieces, I'm thankful.
Did you show people the glow?
I did. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a big piece.
Let me tell you about that. That's a great story. There's a reason why I do glow in my paintings, and it comes down to the first time that I had gotten to go into the Disney Dream Suite, and it was on Mark Davis's centennial, and that was the day that I got to meet Alice Davis, and we became quick friends. And she eventually invited me over to her house, and I got to see all of Mark's things. And she was telling me about how she had 2 sets of costumes made for pirates just in case, and she didn't tell anybody, and because she'd asked for a budget to have 2, but she was so smart that she managed to make 2 sets anyway with the tiny little budget she had. And sure enough, Disney would come to her years later, and she already had the costumes done. She says, "Oh, they're already done. Here they are. I gift them to you." And so again, it's just that kind of testament of the get it done spirit, and people were taking matters into their own hands to push the ball forward, even when maybe they didn't know they needed it. That was even instilled in the costume makers. So that same methodology of anything's possible trickled to everybody, and I saw it in Alice, and she's such a sweet lady, is such a sweetheart. But so we all got to go up to the Disney Dream Suite and check it out, and I'd never been in there. And I go into the kids' room, and they press a button, and there's this massive map of Disneyland, and it lights up with lights. The whole thing comes alive. The lights go down in the room, and then you see the train go around the top, and the whole room comes alive, and you see that map glow. And I got the brilliant idea of putting glow into my painting so that when you turn the lights off, they glow, because I saw what was in the Disney Dream Suite. Now that's Kim Irvine, who came up with, designed that. She's the park art director. So years later, I would, at the 50th anniversary Haunted Mansion event, I would thank her for putting that in there. And I would ultimately get to show her the glow. And she told me that she had seen the mansion piece and she wanted one, and it had sold out. I was going to buy her one and it was already sold out, but she told me it's the most beautiful mansion piece she's ever seen, and she wanted it to hang in her own wall. So to have the park art director, somebody whose mom played Madame Leota, in the attraction, I can't think of a higher praise than that. I trust that woman. She's come up with some beautiful ideas. So I wanted to let her know that her ideas and her artistic eye inspired my artistic choices. And that's how the company works. That's how Disney works. This is really a collaboration. It's not just me. It's a collaboration with my agents, with Disney, with the companies that print these things. And we have to work together to kind of figure out how do we get the best possible product that is going to have the biggest impact to people. And that's a collaboration between a lot of different people from Disney, their research and development department. The archival division has really helped out getting me resources that I can extrapolate from. But one of the things that I want to be known for for Disney art is, I want to be the guy that paints Disney attractions the way that Walt would have wanted you to see them, in a way that you've never seen them, so that they feel like real places, that they really exist, that the riverboat is not just an attraction, it's a real thing, and without characters being the dominating thing that sells them, because from what I've been told, attractions that are just attraction pieces that just have the vehicles, they don't do so well. So to be able to do so well with just landscape pieces, that are mostly environmental pieces, makes me feel like I'm pushing some ground and breaking some ground. And my technique is original to me. It's a hybrid of 3D sculpture, digital painting techniques, acrylic painting techniques, 4 different mediums basically put into one. They take me 2 months to 2 years to do. And just like Walt with Fantasia, I wanted to do something different that nobody was doing before, and it's offered a level of color, contrast, and detail that you don't see with the other paintings on the wall. And the making of pieces that go into that, these little small mini canvases that I paint the characters on, that ultimately get scanned in and layered into the painting. Those are little mini sometimes I have 5 of those things. Sometimes I'll have 15. So I have more originals to offer the public with one painting than the guys that are just painting the one and making copies. And I have more value, I'd like to believe, than the digital artists that don't have an original to offer people. So my price point is a lot higher because I can actually paint. So I've got one back here. This is one of the first ones that I did. I've got hidden things in these paintings. Every single one has something hidden in it that Disney is aware of, by the way. And I like doing that. I like the rewritability of even my paintings, where you can go back and you can see something new and you didn't know it was there. And again, this goes back to my roots with Imagineering and that methodology of everything that I learned when I was on that project working with those guys. So it all kind of comes full circle. It's just one big ball of wax. It's all baked into the cake.
I really love how you're able to reinvent concepts and make them come to life inside of your paintings.
Stuff like that with Disney, that, a lot of these shots, a lot of these movies, a lot of those characters and scenes, like, the dogs in the spaghetti scene in Lady the Tramp, they've been done a bazillion times. So you got to kind of figure out, how do I make this interesting and new? So that's when I put on my Walt hat and figure out ways that I can retell that story in my own way, in an interesting way, to add value to it all. And I hope I'm doing a good job with that.
I mean, I think so, but I'm a little biased.
Yeah, you're a buyer, so you're.
Yeah, a little biased. A little biased.
So taking back to your 8-year-old self that was designing those rides and attractions, and knowing everything that you know now, what advice would you give to potential Imagineers or people who want to look into Imagineering as a career?
Right. I get that all the time. And a lot of people ask me, because I've worked on these attractions, how do I do what you did? And quite frankly, it's a tricky question, because I just accidentally fell into it. So I'm probably not the best candidate for telling you, how that happened. I mean, it was dumb, complete luck, right time, right place. And I have to say, a lot of that is the case for most people. However, Did I give myself a good shot at being right time, right place? Did I take advantage of that right time, right place? Absolutely. I had the skills and I had enough storytelling understanding and lighting design to be the guy that they picked. So it's really about like preparing yourself for what Disney's looking for. CalArts is a great place to go. As you know, Walt Disney helped fund and sponsored that college, and that's where a lot of Disney animators have come from. Certainly a lot of Pixar people have come from that. They allude to it in all their movies. There's an Easter egg of their experience in every one. So preparing yourself and understanding what you need if you're going in as an artist or as a designer is understanding storytelling. Storytelling is paramount. People want to tell a story. So one of my meetings and interactions with Tony Baxter, how he got hired, is the same way that I would recommend everybody go, which is that he showed me a book of a pitch project that he had done in college, Mary Poppin ride, and he did it at 3/4 view, and just designed the whole thing as if it was a real thing. Do what I did at 8, but do it in great detail and tell that story. Tell us where the lighting would go. Tell us what the mood would be. Tell us what the sounds and characters are going to be. Why go through this in such a way, and put it all on paper. One of the guys that I know got hired built a fully articulated, incredibly detailed version of Big Thunder Mountain, and it's fully working. And people, the Imagineers, this is a young kid, teenager, and he did such a great job. No, it was Rainbow Ridge, actually. It was Rainbow Ridge. He did a very detailed version of Rainbow Ridge, and it was actually at Walt's barn. I donated some art that helped bring back one of the trains that Rainbow Ridge trains that was going around. One of the trains was actually falling apart on the rivers of America, and then the Walt's barn came in, rescued it, and then we were trying to salvage it for the Disney company. And they had this model, this incredibly beautiful Rainbow Ridge model, and it turned out that this was a young guy who had just fallen in love with Imagineering, and it became a hobby for him. But all the Imagineers saw it. Guys like Tony saw it, and they gave that kid a shot. They just hired him right away, and that guy is now working for Imagineering. So that's how you do it. You just do it. You don't wait for somebody to give you the job. You just do it. And quite frankly, if Disney doesn't hire you, there's a myriad of other companies that Disney works with outside, like the Angel Studios, like I did, that are making things for Disney, and you get into those companies and you figure those companies out. And so that you just really want to have that attitude of, I could do it and I'm going to do it and nobody's going to stop me from doing it, and I'm just going to keep on working until I get there. And that mentality, as crazy as that sounds, as relentless as that sounds, you getting that final dream come true is all determined upon your ability to hold that passion for as long as it takes to have that happen to you. And I've been told that by countless people who have all achieved their dreams. We're talking about Steven Spielberg. We're talking about Bill Gates. We're talking about all of the Imagineers that I've ever met. They all say the same thing. If you really, really want to do it, you do it well, and you do it even if people aren't paying you to do it until you're doing it. And that's the best advice. That's what I've done. Every single thing that I've wanted to do, I go on the internet, I research it, I read books, I take classes, I teach myself, I YouTube the videos, I figure out how to do it on my own, and then I'm doing it until somebody says, hey, you're good enough for me to pay you to do that. And then I'm doing it. And I've held 30 professional occupations in the entertainment business in 5 different mediums, 5 different industries: movie, game, ride, television, because I had that thinking. So that's exactly how you do it. I would apply that to just about any job. But
so sitting here listening to your stories, you're clearly a pure and a true Disney fan. And like you said, that kind of sparked back when you were a kid writing Pirates of the Caribbean. And you've been blown away by Imagineering. And you kind of carried that passion with you throughout your time working with the company. So with that passion and the work that they do, what would you like to see from Imagineering in the future?
Yeah, well, let's just look at something that's recent. When I look at Galaxy's Edge, I will be blunt. I will criticize them. I will criticize that effort because that's what Imagineers should be doing. They should always be kicking the tires. Walt came in and he was tough. and he didn't sugarcoat it, and he said that that's not working. So I'm going to put on my Walt hat for a second and criticize it. So before this last attraction came out, the big one that just was, Rise of the Resistance came out, I looked at that 14 acres, and we're talking about the biggest land in Disneyland, thinking, wow, this is a very, very expensive 14-acre strip mall where the attraction to store and restaurant ratio was horrible, where there was nothing to do for children, in a family park, in Walt's family park. It broke my heart. I got to be honest. I was disappointed. I was upset. They had a lot of land, and if you're going to break Walt's ban on alcohol, at least make a cantina that doesn't require reservations, because it's so tiny where you're forced to sit next to people that you don't even know in a booth that you supposedly had reserved for, where you're buying really expensive drinks that are, one of them is designed to numb your mouth so you can't even taste it. So I don't understand that thinking. That doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't sound like a pleasant experience. That sounds like a nice thing to do once and then never go back again to. I see the Millennium Falcon, that was made in China, that giant, beautiful vehicle. And granted, it's beautiful. I will not shortchange the artistic Herculean task it took to make that. That is like Mount Rushmore. But just like Mount Rushmore, you're going to see it, you're going to take your pictures, and then you're not going to come back. So I think there's missed opportunities for Disney to where they could have made it a situation where they could have gone in, you could have walked up that ramp and maybe gone into a couple areas, maybe even sat in the cockpit and taken a picture with the Wookiee from outside. Well, your kid is inside, and they could have made that the ultimate picture opportunity. And what would that have taken? Them ramps already in there, them just kind of building out the inside just a little bit more. And when I look just from what Star Tours did, what Tony Baxter's brilliant Star Tours did, it was genius. That was an attraction that didn't have motion sickness because they had figured out how to do that. And here I am writing a Millennium Falcon attraction that is super sophisticated, way more sophisticated, and yet it's the same movie over and over and over again. And the level of interactivity is hold the button and close your eyes, it doesn't matter. And truly, an experience like that in an age where a $400 PlayStation VR could upstage it, to me, felt like a miss. And it felt like a massive waste of money. Fun, good. I mean, the walkthrough is incredible detail, and you got to hand it to all the artisans that built that land. But if you also look at it from an artistic standpoint, like I would, well, if you took out all of the vehicles and the characters that are in there, you would think this could be Aladdin land if you stage it right, or it could be Star Trek land if you stage it right, or Battlestar Galactica land for that. There's nothing that overtly tells me that this is the Star Wars of my childhood, because we don't have any of the classic characters that you would associate with it. And the ones that don't even look like the characters that, like the Wookiee doesn't really look like the Wookiee to me. And why don't we have R2-D2 and C-3PO? Now, we've got R2-D2 has popped up, and so we've got BB-8 and all that. But why couldn't we have C-3PO? I mean, he's a robot. He never dies, and he's still alive. He was alive in the last one. He'd still exist. Why wouldn't we have that guy walking around? That would have been a great experience to take pictures with C-3PO. Maybe it's too hot and uncomfortable in that type of a suit. I don't know. But ultimately, you're looking at 14 acres of a lot of nothing to me. Nothing for children. And it broke my heart. I got to be honest. But that being said, this new attraction, I cried. I cried at the end of it. I cried. I hugged my party. Everybody got off, and I got emotional. And I cried. I'm not joking. I said, I can't believe what just happened to me. So did they just create the world's most amazing and extraordinary attraction ever that may stand the test of many, many decades? Probably. I'm going to say it could still be plussed. There's still things that they could do to make it even better. But I think they knocked it out of the park. So it kind of gives value to, I think, the rest of that land. And hopefully, with the Imagineers that are there, I hope they are licking their wounds after a lot of people, retired and or quit or were let go, and we had low attendance, that they regroup and do what they've always done with things that they've spent a lot of money on that didn't quite work out, where they slowly figure out ways to make it interesting. So I would move towards what Knott's Berry Farm has done, where we've got a story where there's a lot more interaction going. There's battles going on. Maybe we have drones flying over you, that are sci-fi looking Star Wars drones hovering. Maybe we've got a Jabba the Hutt experience where we can take a picture with a Jabba the Hutt type guy, and you're standing on the Rancor pit and it's vibrating, and you can wear a hood, and you got the little puppet going, and there's a narrative there. There's a story where you can, you can be interrogated by Jabba, and maybe at the end of it, the trap door opens up and you're in a Rancor pit and you're experiencing that. There's so many different opportunities to take advantage of storytelling with known characters that we love, that we would love to interact with, that I think eventually it'll be redeemed and be the land that we're all hoping it will be. I think augmented reality is really going to take everything to a whole nother level, not VR, but AR, where we're seeing the real world, but we're superimposing CG on top of it. And I think that's the future of ride technology, hands down, for the foreseeable future. I can't imagine it being anything but that, actually. And we're starting to see that with the Mickey's train. They're doing it with projections, but I think ultimately we could do those with really sophisticated glass technology and take it to another level where you really feel like you're there, and you don't have to have massive amounts of space to do it. So now I do have rumors. There's a lot of rumors, but from what I've been told, they're looking at Tomorrowland, and they're looking at now they're redoing Fantasyland sections of Fantasyland with Snow White. If I was to have a hope for Tomorrowland, and maybe you guys will agree, I'd love to see us go back to Walt's original Tomorrowland, where we get modern day versions of Journey Through Inner Space, modern day versions of Mission to Mars and planetary exploration. Let's get back to inspiring kids into science and math and taking care of the planet, and make that a beacon of inspiration like it should have been. And if you go retro but modernize it, you eliminate that problem that's plagued Walt Disney himself and all the Imagineers after it, which is that we don't know how to keep that constantly new. And you don't have to. It just has to be the beacon of inspiration for rocketry that it was meant to be. And that you can always have things connected to that evolve, but getting back to that feeling of wanting to care about science, and that's what that land is supposed to be about. And how they do that, I hope it's just not an IP grab where we're doing, IP regurgitated somebody else's IPs, and it's planted into Disney. I think that's the way it might be going, though. Nobody takes risks on anything unless it's been tested already in books and film and movies and games already. So I think that's going to be the mode of operation, just because you got to have sure bets with big money now. They're big risks, and they last for millions of dollars. That's one of the things that people don't understand. Why are some of these attractions still there when they have clearly dated themselves? Well, Imagineers have a metric. They put money into it, and granted, they don't have the e-ticket scenario, so they don't know if an individual attraction is going to draw people in through the door, so that because they don't have the e-ticket. So what they have to do instead is just kind of take a tally of people that are going through so many years of it existing for them to get their money back on an investment like that. So a lot of these attractions that you wish would be gone are just simply stuck there, not because for any other reason, because they haven't gotten their money out of it yet, believe it or not. And that's a shame, but it is what it is, and that's their process. So, but hopefully we'll get a big, massive facelift to Tomorrowland here in the next 10 years. And I know for a fact they're working on things, and I can't say what, but so it'll be Marvel Land next, and then Fantasyland in tandem, and then they're going to be moving eventually to Tomorrowland after that. So we'll see how it goes.
We're jealous being Walt Disney Worlders, and it's it's been 10 years since we've had anything in Fantasyland, and they added the new section but then left all the old stuff, so it still looks like the carnival. And I absolutely love your Fantasyland over Disneyland. It's breathtaking. And that
wasn't the way Walt built it. We didn't have the beautiful facades. That was eventually upgraded. So I think what it is, if I was going to say, what would I want Imagineers to do now? It would be, there's nothing wrong with change. There's nothing wrong with change. But so if it makes the attraction and it muddies it up, and changes it from the original intention. I think that's a problem. But just to give Disney, a pat on the back, when they closed down the Rivers of America and they chopped it up, they knew that they were going to have to gut a part of that leg of that river in order to expand Galaxy's Edge. When they brought that back up, and I took a ride around the river, they had dramatically improved that back area. I mean, it's the most beautiful section of Disneyland on that river now, with waterfalls and just hand-carved, sculptured rock, and they fixed the house that was on fire. Now it's a beautiful cabin, and it's just really, really beautiful storytelling going on back there. So that's an example of where they had a lot of money. They knew they had to make some tough choices, but the choices turned out to be an improvement. And that's what I would want to see with all Imagineers that are out there. And even though I'm not an internal, I was never an internal Imagineer. I was an honorary one. I worked to help build attractions. I understand how they think. That's what I would want to see from the Imagineering staff that's moving forward. Is, if you're going to change it, I don't have any problem with change as long as you're going back to Walt's initial thinking, and how do you make a really beautiful story without getting into the politics and getting into the muddy water of trying to appease everybody, appease the critics. That's not something that Walt ever cared about. He never cared about the critics. He always cared about the people, And so that's the focus I would think of when I'm thinking about where they should go.
So Joel, you've been working on this really awesome project for kids. What can you tell us about it?
Well, it's called Friendlians, and for those people that I before E is tricky like me, I'm dyslexic. That's spelled friend, Liens, and I decided to create a children's show just out of necessity. Being a single dad, I got 2 twin girls, like Walt. I had 2 daughters, but I got a son on top of that, and I was struggling trying to figure out what I could do, what products I could find that would support me as a parent. Like, where's the product that would help me inspire my kids to make their bed or brush their teeth right, or clean up their messes, or listen to me. And I looked around and I couldn't find a single lifestyle brand that I out there where there were products that were inspiring children to do good. And so, this guy came along 8 years ago into my life, Rod Nakamoto, and he had this technology called Marionetics, and he wanted to make toys come alive. And we worked together and came up with this. It's kind of a Toy Story for real technology. It's a little $5 device, the size of a pack of gum, that we can make the chips about $5, and they come with a speaker and a battery pack, and we can put it inside a plush toy. And right now, I can honestly say we haven't just achieved the Tiki room. We can do it right now in our living room through that $5 device wirelessly, where all of the toys will talk to each other forever. We can literally perform the Toy Story movies in our house with toys. So moving and animating hasn't happened yet. That requires lots and lots of money, but we can do that. We have technology that can push CD quality sound through up to 24 toys based off of one Wi-Fi connection. That's ridiculous performance power. So we can have 24 toys at CD quality talking back and forth to each other forever. And we can have robotics so that signal isn't, that audio signal isn't disrupted. We can actually have robotics, so these toys can move too. So just like the Tiki room, we could do that now. And we've taken it a little further. I started extrapolating different ways that we could apply this technology to other forms of entertainment. And so I came up with a new form of entertainment called nonlinear dynamic storytelling. And this is picking up where Disney left off on audio animatronics. So right now those stories are linear, but with ours we could tell the Little Red Riding Hood story through one toy, for example, if that's all you could afford. And that one toy, maybe you hear that one story read to you like a narrator would read an audiobook, the Little Red Riding Hood story. But let's say your neighborhood kid got one for Christmas and he brings it over. Well, now you got 2 toys within a radius of each other. Just by them being within a radius of each other, they will now recognize each other. And when you hear that Little Red Riding Hood story again, one will become the big bad wolf and the other one, Little Red Riding Hood. and they will perform it to you, and it won't be like it was read to you. It'll be performed. So the story is the same story, it's just changed. But let's say we get a third person with a toy. The other neighbor across the way, they come in. Now you got a narrator, and in between those actors, narrating the story. Now let's imagine you get all the neighborhood kids in your house. They all got their toys in a little powwow circle. Each one could be assigned an instrument, like a clarinet, and to play a piece, one part, in a full orchestration that's playing behind that performed and narrated piece. And this all happens automatically on the fly, dynamically. You don't have to do anything. They just know that there's this in the radius. You just add them to the network, and it works. To take that even one step further, if that wasn't mind-blowing enough that I've created Toy Story for Real with my partner Rod Nakamoto, we also can, right now, have this technology interact with movies, games, and rides in real time. So imagine having a Mickey Mouse sitting next to you in Pirates, and it's reacting to all of the pirates and talking and maybe even injecting itself into the story. I took the idea of, well, what would I use this technology for? And I thought, well, I could teach a child better than a Harvard professor, because I could load the cloud up with every possible teaching methodology on any given question. So if I had a question, I could have 15 different teaching methodologies in the cloud. And if the child didn't understand the answer, then we would just pull from the cloud and have the little robot teach you a different way until you get it. So once I got to that point in development, I looked at it as, well, I'm never going to get this funded financially. There's people not going to risk money on one guy who's never made a toy in his life with high-end technology that's never been tested. So I thought, well, I really like the idea of just teaching kids good things. I like Walt, and Walt always wanted to inspire children. And I guess I've either through osmosis or just that's who I am. I just wanted to be like Walt, and I wanted to kind of teach people like he did. And, where are the Mr. Rogers of today? I just looked around and thought, it'd be really cool to create like an alien race. I'll do what Rod Serling did, so nobody can criticize the skin color of my characters, and I'll teach them moral stories, life lessons. But instead of just using my own opinions, I'd use evidence-based research to teach these things, so that we can teach kids, about how to combat bullying, but we'd be using the best methods out there. Or maybe I'd teach a kid how to, deal with childhood obesity, and we'd figure out the best methods for that. Or taking care of the planet, we find the best methods for that. So again, I'm Disney's in me, so I just trying to deploy a product that can teach children how to not say no to problems, and instead figure out creative ways to learn how to work together peacefully despite our differences in our ideologies. I mean, that to me is probably the most powerful mission statement I can offer you for what Friendlians is really about. So I raised some money. I got $5,000 and did an app and put it out there. And 2 days later, it was the #1 rated app in the App Store in the parenting section. And so I did that on Android, and I went bigger and got a bigger investor. And by complete dumb luck, I signed the agreement on my first company with my first product with revolutionary technology that you could say is very Walt-like on Mickey's birthday. And we didn't plan that. I found out after we signed the contract that had happened, and it just kind of happened. If maybe that's Walt just giving me a nod of approval, I don't know, but it was a very serendipitous moment, how the timing all worked. And now with the coronavirus and everybody staying at home, we offered it for free for 7 days, and then after that you can get it for $2, one-time fee. And we'd like to think that $2 is worth the price of having 3D cartoons, all of which I produced by myself. And again, not on purpose, but reliving Walt's life, I had to, out of budgetary constraints, voice a lot of these characters on my own. So I am the voice of a lot of them. I animated them. I had to teach myself animation, and just like Walt was doing very puppeteering type animation early on, and I've gotten pretty good at it. And I produced these little shorts, just like Walt when he was first starting out. So again, not just by complete dumb luck and not on purpose, I'm reliving his life and using his same kind of course of action so that we can make an animation company with little shorts that ultimately teach people and get people excited, like Mickey Mouse did. This happy-go-lucky guy. I've got a lot of those. That's what Friendlians are, just happy-go-lucky people trying to be nice to each other. That will eventually, hopefully, lend itself to products that I can make, watches and bed sheet covers that have instructions on how to make your bed work right into the beautiful artwork, light switch covers that you want to turn off the lights because they glow and they have a secret message, toothbrushes that turn it into a game to brush your teeth, all these things that make it fun to do things that kids don't want to do, and make it a reward system. So we turn it into like Chuck E. Cheese. Right now we've got a little chore helper where a parent can take a picture of a bed, turn it into an icon, write a description, give it a point value, and then the parent can videotape themselves or take a picture of what the reward would be. So the kid checks off the things that they've done, and the parent comes and approves it, and it fills up a little meter, and then you get to see what the reward was. And you can either make it a surprise, or you can let them see what the surprise is before they get it. So it's kind of a Chuck E. Cheese-like thing if we were to attach products to that, where the products could be the reward. And we're hoping that we can generate enough revenue from our animation company, which is really just a company of one at this moment with a couple of people that are helping me, that we can make that technology and connect that technology to the app, so that eventually we're handing out Friendlians that could teach your children better than a Harvard professor. And so that's really where I'm going. And ultimately, yes, someday we want to make cultural centers and theme parks where you can take your family, and instead of just going to a park where you're spending loads of money being entertained, you're being entertained, but you're also learning a life skill, So maybe instead of the staff cooking the food, you're cooking the food, and you're learning how to cook the food with other people. And, maybe there's problems in your family, and those problems are resolved by kind of a fantasy island type of an experience that we've controlled, so that the Friendlians in this world that we want to build, that's peaceful, where people are working together despite their differences, you can learn that mode of operation, so that when you leave that place, you come out, inspired and feel like your family's better. I get choked up about this because it matters so much to me, especially with what's going on right now. We're going to need that methodology. We're going to need thinking that way, relying on each other, having that Walt do anything mentality, that anything there's nothing that's not insurmountable that we can't overcome. You have to be thinking that way with the economic collapse that we seem to be seeing here. So I think that the project is timely. And I think, if you got kids, go to friendlians.club. I actually put it .club to honor Mickey Mouse Club, of course. So mine's not a .com, folks. It's a .club. And we hope that people will support what I'm trying to do and believe what I'm trying to do. And maybe if I'm lucky, I'll have even a small, speck of impact that Walt did. And that's all anybody can really hope.
I just want to say that I absolutely love your focus on edutainment. So coming from my kindergarten teacher background, there is absolutely a need for those social skill learning programs, and for the life skills and the social emotional learning, and just how to cope with situations. Like, it's a huge issue that we're seeing in early elementary classrooms. So I absolutely see a need for all of your products, and I'm looking forward to see how they can be used.
Thank you for sharing that and everything. Now, how can our followers and our listeners, how can they follow you on your journey? Where can they go to find more information about you?
Well, if you just type in Joel Payne, Joel Payne in Google, you can't miss me. I'm all over the place. I'm on Instagram, Joel Christopher Payne on Instagram. I post on there every once in a while. If you want to see my latest and greatest paintings, go to Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. I have a private account. I think I'm almost maxed to my 5,000, but you can still follow me, and I make all my posts public. So just Joel Christopher Payne on Facebook. Don't follow my fan page, 50,000 people, and you got to pay for anybody to see what I'm posting. So I don't do that. But wishpictures.com is my main website. And on wishpictures.com, you can see my little bio. And I was told that Michael Caine, the famous actor, did a little voiceover for me on my life story there. Kind of a complete dumb luck again. Just my life is crazy. So how that stuff happens, I don't know. But anyway, that gives a kind of a summary of my whole career. And then Friendlians, which is spelled friend, LIENS.club. And you can find Friendlians on the app stores, both app stores, iOS and Android. And there you go. That's everything. I'm on LinkedIn too, if you want to find me there.
That's awesome. Joel, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure, and I have no doubt that our listeners will be able to take your story and use it as inspiration in their lives. We hope that you enjoyed these stories. Be sure to tune in next time when we'll have even more stories from another Walt Disney Imagineer.